when you think about like that snowball that gets rolling, how, like if it were to get the winds going in just the right direction, what would need to happen for this to break loose and really, because I think to really be World War III in the way that people think about it, you're going to need China, Russia, or both.
I don't think World War III in the way people think about it is ever going to happen. We have never in history seen a new global conflict that was the same as the previous global conflict. I mean, even going back to like when empires were fighting each other, like advances in technology and combat strategy, and it transforms the nature of conflict. So not only do we have a different kind of world war capacity, not just in terms of like bullets, guns, and airplanes, but also in terms of cyber capabilities, and also in terms of electrical grid attacks, and also in terms of mass utility attacks. Like we live in a completely different world than we did during World War II.
So you're saying World War III, you extend a definition that includes some of the economic and cyber things that we're doing.
Because they just weren't options for World War II. Like what we could do economically, we did. And what we could do technologically, we did. And then that was the same thing that happened in World War I. Like we did what we could do, but we didn't have certain technologies or advancements. So now we do. And countries have learned over time that interstate conflict, between the war between nations, interstate, is super expensive, super difficult to prolong, super costly in terms of lives, and the lives that are lost impact the productivity post-war. So all countries want to find a way to prosecute war in a cheaper, more resilient, more recoverable fashion. And that's independent if you're communist or not communist or a warlord in Democratic Republic of Congo. We all understand that. We don't want to just throw people to the wolves. We want to find a way to make it productive. That's why Russia throws criminals into war, because those are the least productive people in society. So when we think about World War III, we have to give up the notion that it's going to look the way we think it's going to look if we think it's going to look anything like World War II. You got to give up that notion and start thinking, how would I prosecute war?
But do you think it's really going to stop being kinetic? Because when I think about what the next war is going to look like, it looks like Russia-Ukraine. It looks like a bunch of fiber optic cables everywhere, drones all over the place. And it seems like, from the footage that I've seen, that's what we're seeing right now with a lot of what Iran is doing. It looks like Russia-Ukraine, but a little bit more advanced. Like the drones, instead of zzz, it's like they look like miniature jet fighters. You know what I mean? So
it will be kinetic.
Yeah,
I agree. It will be kinetic. The kinetic targets will be different. It used to be that a kinetic
data centers now. It's part of it. It's crazy.
Yeah, a kinetic target in the past used to be an electrical grid, or it used to be a bunker that held artillery rounds. Well, and you used to use artillery to launch indiscriminately in a general direction to try to blow up a bunch of people. Well, now you don't need to do that. Now you can fly a drone. You can fly a drone with FPV that hits a specific soldier if you choose to. Well, now as you get into the opportunity for automated weapons, I mean, laser-guided munitions, which have been around since the 90s, basically just means that someone can sit 2 miles over there and put an invisible laser on you, and a munition can be flown from 200 miles that direction and hit you exactly.
That is wild.
That's technology that's been around since the 90s. All we're doing with AI now is essentially like saying wherever this cell phone signal is, when you can match the cell phone signal with the typical algorithmic movement of a human being walking, when those two things exist, deploy your lethal force, right? That's an automated weapon, not even autonomous weapon. That's just an automated weapon. We will go in that direction so that munitions can be used to deliver maximum damage at minimum cost. So there will always be a kinetic element to warfare, but it will never be I don't think it will ever be as kinetic as what we saw in World War II. And I don't think it will be as biologically or chemical based as what we saw in World War. When you have a pragmatic relationship, right? When you have a friend with benefits instead of a wife, you don't volunteer that information. You don't back up your friend with benefits whenever they're like out of rent, when they can't pay their bills, or when they're struggling, or when they get, when the police arrest them, or when they end up in the emergency room, you rush to your wife because she's ideologically aligned with you. You don't rush to your mistress. You're like, oh, you're in the ER. I'll get to you when I have a second. That's the same thing that that's the same type of relationship that exists between Russia, China, and Iran. It's more of a mistress than a spouse. So they still want to hook up, but they're not going to risk geopolitical blowback from all over the world when they're trying to really position themselves, like China especially is really trying to position itself as a counter force, a stabilizing force versus the United States' unstabilizing nature.
That is so wild. But
so it's in their best interest to
look like the adult,
not say anything, offer humanitarian aid, which I guarantee you is coming, offer financial aid and infrastructure support, which I guarantee is coming. When we left Afghanistan, who swooped in? China. China knows this playbook because they've learned it from us.
Yeah.
And now they're watching us experiment with a new playbook, a playbook that we call doctrinally inside the Department of War and inside the White House. We call this peace through strength. Peace through strength. Anybody who's a military strategic sciences nerd out there is going to understand that when you talk about political science and military doctrine, power and strength are two very different things. Power is the sum total of all of your capabilities. Strength is the limit of one capability. So lots of different strengths constitute your power. So peace through power makes sense because you basically have unlimited capabilities. Influence, diplomacy, kinetic weapons, cyber attacks, offensive, defensive powers, nuclear weapons, space-based weapons, whatever you want, right? Power is infinite. Strength is inherently limited. Once your rockets are spent, you're not strong anymore. When you go to the gym, you have a very different level of strength than when you leave the gym 90 minutes later. So peace through strength, for everybody out there who's looking at the United States and trying to think how would we prosecute conflict with the United States, they're realizing like, oh shit, the United States is going to essentially blow their load with this strength play and leave themselves empty of power. Because the more that we do things like kill heads of state and render people we disagree with, we actually lose power because one of the power tools is influence. So now Europe doesn't want to deal with us. Africa doesn't really want to deal with us. Asia doesn't really want to deal with us. Latin America doesn't want to, but is forced to because we're their number one priority, apparently, or they're our number one priority. So we're literally reducing our power by demonstrating all this strength. And then economically, if we can't back it up, then what's going to replace the strength that we've spent? The actual cruise missiles, the actual soldiers, the actual deployed boats that now live 2,000 miles away from home. What are we going to use when something pops up that we need a boat or a naval armada here in the United States or in the South China Seas?
Yeah. Okay. So one more China thing on the table. So they have said publicly many times that they plan to take Taiwan in 2027 or by 2027. Supposedly the U.S. government has notified like Apple and other major companies with big things in China or Taiwan. They've notified them of that so that they can begin making plans. How much of this do you think is China biding their time, letting America make potential mistakes so that they can waltz in and take Taiwan and be like, you guys are busy over here spending your power, spending your strength foolishly. And so now we're just going to take it.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of their strategy right now. If somebody else is, if you're in competition with a neighbor, you're trying to make your house worth more than your neighbor's house. And your neighbor is like smoking inside, having big weekend parties where a bunch of people come over and break glass and throw up on the floor. You're not even going to invest in your own house. You're just like, I'm happy to just live in my house. They are literally reducing the value of their house every day. So a big part of China's cultural approach to conflict is to wait out the opponent, to just let them self-destruct. That's what they've been doing all through the global war on terror. When China really pivoted and became a near-peer competitor was over the 22-year war that we had in Afghanistan and Iraq. They stole our technology, replicated it for themselves, became a secondary option for the same technology that we had been selling, only now they're doing it. So now the whole world has two choices where they previously only had one choice for technological products. Phones, computers, servers, electric vehicles, satellites, telecommunication, you name it, right? And China's options were cheaper. And China's options performed almost as well as American options because not only were they stealing our tech, but they were stealing European tech too. So they were making their own kind of Frankenstein of the best of both worlds. Well, and then we woke up in 2022 and we're like, holy shit, China is now a near peer competitor. They went from being a backwoods country, silly communist country in, 2000, to being a literal near peer competitor at pace with countries like Russia that have always been a competitor with the United States going back to the end of the Cold War or the end of World War II. So China knows that it can be patient. On top of that, China also recognizes that every day that they spend building munitions, that the United States spends using munitions, they now have a dominant position in terms of surplus of actual war capability, power. And then their number one interest is unification with Taiwan, which lies, 150 miles off their coast? The United States has to play an away game to get to Taiwan. Yeah. And China recognizes that modern day warfare looks nothing like old world warfare. Even going back to Sun Tzu and the Art of War, Sun Tzu talks about how you have to adjust your strategy for warfare based on the environment and the time of day and the enemy that you're fighting. So the Chinese have always thought that way. Where the United States, we are very much a hammer and nail kind of country. It's like, oh, where's the next nail that I can use my hammer on, right? Bomb, missile, bomb, troops, tanks. That's what we do. That's what got us through World War II. China's not like that. China's like, we could use a cyber attack. At the end of 2024, Chinese covert influence successfully turned the Congress, the parliament of Taiwan, into a majoritively pro-unification parliament. So just, I'm verbose and I'm sorry if I'm boring you, but that's what China's doing. They're using all the tools of power to win Taiwan without us even noticing. Yeah. And the ultimate victory, even in Sun Tzu, the ultimate victory is when the enemy just joins you. And they already have the KMT party in the majority position of Taiwan's parliament. That's 50% of the battle. They may never need to even risk blowing up a center of energy or a data center or any kind of manufacturing base. They might just get Taiwan to say, we want to be part of China ourselves.
That would be wild.
Could it happen by 2027? I don't know. But that's the other thing that's beautiful is Xi Jinping said 2027, but he's the leader of the country. He can always say, we're going to change that to 2029, folks. We're going to change that to 2035. He chooses whatever he wants, especially if the United States is busy killing itself, dividing itself, subdividing itself, making enemies of the rest of the world. All of a sudden, Taiwan may not become their number one priority. Maybe Taiwan is going to be like, hey, they're already on a slippery slope to rejoining us. Let's focus now on Iran.
All right, you brought up a couple times the idea of being divided. How divided do you think Iran is? So I think about what America looks like from the outside. And if you look at Minnesota, it looks like we're just bitterly divided. If you're walking down the average street, though, it looks fine. You can look at one protest and it's Iranians, Jewish Americans, and Americans like all out waving each other's flags and celebrating after Khomeini was killed. And so you're seeing stuff come out of Iran where it's like, oh, pro-government people are marching. Oh, wait, anti-government people are marching. Do you have any sense of like who's bigger? Is it 80-20? What does that look like?
I have no idea. And what I love about your question is that we have to recognize that nobody who speaks English and not Farsi has any idea. So when you see something in the newspaper, when you see something on Twitter, when you see something hit your social media feed, oh my gosh, pro-Iranian protests are in the street. People are crying about the death of Khomeini. That can be true without being 80% of the population. Yeah. And vice versa. I'm sure that there are people who are waving in the streets and very excited and setting off fireworks that Khomeini is dead. But does that make them the 80%? I don't know. And I have to push back. I have to challenge anybody who tries to say they know how that's going to turn out. Because the person today who loves the fact that Khomeini was killed, when their water doesn't work in 3 days, they may not love the fact that Khomeini was killed. Yeah. Anything can change, right? I'm a pro-US person today because they killed the Ayatollah, but then a spare Israeli bomb kills my daughter at her school tomorrow, and now I'm not pro-Israel in the United States anymore.
Yeah.
Every day that this thing goes on, it becomes less and less predictable. And the first day that it started, we had no idea how it was going to go. So it's one of those things where like, this really speaks to me. It really shows me the lack of prudent combat decision-making and experience that surrounds the president in his perch at the White House. This is why you're supposed to have advisors who have combat experience and who have been in war and who have served in their positions for a long period of time and who speak truth to you so that you don't make these decisions lightly. And instead, we have a guy with no military experience as the Department of War. We've got a guy with no military experience as the Department of State. We have the president, and the three of them together are basically the holy trinity of foreign policy right now. And that foreign policy is coming at the edge of a knife. If you like that video, you're going to love the next one, and I'll see you there. Who has raised 3 children. That person has invested in the success of their country.
That will die in 20 years. And I'm 19, I will live for the rest.
But you're 19 and you've done nothing for your country.